Thank you for joining us. This show is to cover the trade week of August 15th, 2022, primarily focusing on Tesla and the general market. In particular, we really wanted to focus on what I'm wanting to call it Millionaire Fridays. If you can actually come up with a process to figure out the trading activities of Tesla on Friday in particular, there's an opportunity there to make some huge money, and we wanted to review some of the rudiments of this. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe, as well as join us on Patreon for investing and trading ideas on a daily basis that'll enhance the process of your investments. So usually we finish up our trade week preview on a Sunday and then sort of go through what's happening during the week. Last week was sort of trade heavy in our discussions on our show. Obviously, it was driven by there was a lot happening in terms of the movement of the stock price, Elon selling stock, a whole bunch of things occurring that were moving prices around. So I'd have to say that we're not targeting trading all the time. We're covering a lot of different topics that impact Tesla and its success, and that includes what's going on in the trading space. As you know, this past week, we had what I call another Friday surprise. So what's the big deal about Friday? In particular, this coming Friday is what's called triple witching, which means that there are a number of options and futures that all expire on the same day. And as that's rolled over, it can result in some severe volatility of all the stocks and indices. Now, we've kind of developed a pattern over the last few years, but in particular, over the last few months, as Tesla has started the process of a recovery, we're kind of ending up in this situation where Fridays tend to be a pretty amazing big day. Now, there's a guy named Taleb, and he wrote a book called Black Swan. So one of the techniques that Taleb advocates is literally they have hedge funds that he created that are focused on simply buying options heading into the Friday trading session and writing them out, based on their analysis, either good or bad, in order to determine what's going to happen and potentially make a great deal of money in the process. Now, as a test of this whole theory, I had recommended you consider picking up one put, one call and go through the Friday session and kind of see what happens. Now, that theory this week kind of came through, was tested. The stock was lurking at 860s-ish. And then all of a sudden, based on the market having a strong move, Tesla popped up to over 900. So this, in my mind, if you're properly set up to trade, was quite awesome. Why? Because in the middle of the day, in the noon time frame, when the stock price shot from there to the end of the day over 905, there are instruments that were selling for as little as $5 that closed out the day at $500. So this is why there's like a buy it and forget it phenomenon of learning the potential of this in terms of how lucrative it can be, and then leveraging yourself into trading this, despite the fact that it's highly risky. You could lose a lot of money if you put it to work, but it's also one of those things where it's a total trading situation. There's investing involved a little bit, but it's 95% trading, 5% investing. I really think it's worth the time to try to check it out and understand, because of how lucrative it is, bottom line. And this was another example. So obviously, if you can my recommendation was you're spending $5 on one side and you're probably spending 10 or $15 on the other. And in theory, you come up with, $500 to $1,000 as your payoff. You can do the math. 1,000 times your money, definitely worth it, but only if you're never going to get that. I think the way to handle it is a kind of a straddle where you're buying a put and buying a call and testing out both sides of it. But I have to admit, I've been very reluctant to do the show because I know it can make money, but the problem is it's easy to get greedy on one side. So this past week, we saw a situation, primarily where Tesla is trading at a range between 850 and about 950. And it had sort of found the bottom of that range as we got to Friday. But as the market strengthened, we then pushed nicely up to 900, and we've continued that run since. Obviously, there's a lot of good news helping Tesla. For example, the new Fed stuff that gives breaks on car prices and other hidden methods for how climate change is being addressed. And so this is terrific. I would say that it really is worth the time to sort of study this and what's going on, and then start building sort of a knowledge base about how this typically has worked. So, for example, this past week, we're at the bottom of the range, and the stock price shot up, into the 900s. The prior week, as you recall, Tesla actually was sitting in their, 930s and finished up the day at 864. So that's the other side of how this whole process works, i.e. the put or downside of it, but can actually still be lucrative if you maintain a disciplined process. So why is it worth the headache? How about 1,000% in 4 or 5 hours? That's why it's worth the headache. I have to say, very nervous about telling you guys about this because it takes a lot of work to understand the instruments you have at your disposal and leverage them properly. Yes, it's possible to lose a lot of money, but it's also possible to make a great deal of money. The question mark is always, is it worth the time to study it based on the potentially how lucrative it might be? And I think that's kind of what this whole situation is about. So we've sort of covered the last couple of weeks and what's going on with trading. The question is what's going to happen to the next week. And the answer is that first you look at what are the natural catalysts out there. In theory, Tesla is enjoying a push up along with the rest of the market as oil prices fall. But we're also in a period where there's still the split for Tesla coming up. And there are periodically sort of surprises in terms of increased production that sort of gets a nice push on the stock as well. I would argue, and we make this argument in some of the other shows, that we have an interesting phenomenon going where basically every $10 fall in oil prices is kind of worth about 50 points to the growth in Tesla stock price, and it also impacts the S&P as well. So what I'm anticipating seeing then this week is that it's my belief that oil actually goes to 80 or below this week because of what we covered in our previous video, focused on the fact that Russia has handed out a $35 a barrel discount. And what's starting to happen, in my mind, is that across the globe right now, the oil entities are stuck. If they've lost customers through Russia, i.e. China and India, they have to replace those customers. And the question mark is, what's the incentive for new customers to buy from those oil entities now if they have not already been buying? And I believe the answer is a better price. And so I really think there's a recalibration of price going on between different countries in terms of how oil is going to be priced, given sort of the backdoor impact of Russia's $35 discount. There are folks on our channel that are brilliant and could definitely dive into more of the prisoner's dilemma discussion about how pricing on oil would work. But I'm going out on a limb, as I did previously, and saying that I believe it will take time, perhaps another, you know, month to 2 months, to make up for the gap in price between what India and China are paying and others are paying. Could this be longer? Absolutely. It could also be shorter because those computers are watching, how much production you're doing. You've got to move your production. At what price do you get to move it at? If you do a little bit lower, what happens when another country finds out you're discounting, and then in order to keep their customers and not lose them, they're going to have to meet market prices. So I really think that this is a chain reaction of price reductions that result in oil prices sort of meeting approximately what the Chinese and Indians are paying, and therefore we get a really nice price break. Let's also not forget, it's a more minor issue, but all of the high cost, i.e., the fracking and the Canadian oil sands folks, they can only make money above $50 a barrel, in some cases $60 to $70 a barrel. And they need to push production as hard as possible right now to optimize the current price conditions. So their products are increasing, by a certain percentage on a monthly basis as they, sort of explore more oil wherever they might get it from. But the bottom line is it's more expensive, and above $50 a barrel, they have to push as much production as they can to optimize that circumstance. So as these oil prices fall, it is a catalyst for the S&P, but it's also a catalyst for Tesla. And the Fed is thrilled about this as well. So that's another variable impacting the whole party. So I really see this being a positive week based on oil prices falling and that affecting positively where Tesla stock price is going. So if you're on the, I want to say, positive side, I think you're going to see some nice numbers this week. And as we move into the split next week, obviously, I think that's a push for Tesla stock price that's beyond what's going on in the general market. I will also say that Tesla's decision to move new orders for the extended range vehicles back into 2020, back a year, so we're into 24 now, suggests that demand is still strong, particularly for the longer range is also pretty strong. So I thought this was kind of interesting. At any rate, this is sort of the close of our trade week. I'm looking for Tesla to break out of its sort of 950 top end that it's done for the last few weeks at the high end, and then retreat back into the 850s. It is market dependent, but I think there's a real case for Tesla to, in the next week, get to or breach the 1,000 price, really driven by oil. So an $85 oil, I think, gets Tesla to 1,000 pretty easily, perhaps further. So we look forward to seeing how this works out and any new information from Tesla that might cause us to go further. I want to thank you again for joining us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, au revoir, lehitro, choda hafez, zdravíte, Russian, ni hao ma, Chinese, konbanwa, Japanese. The final note I wanted to make here is focused on our health tip for this week. A few of the doctors we've interviewed focus on gout. And so it turns out that as you age, you may find that there are certain foods that cause problems that didn't when you were younger, and one of those elements of it might be gout. So if you're having some health challenges, you might want to consider this as something to sort of read up on and modify diet accordingly to sort of get a better outcome in that space. We're continuing to retain our health tip at the end that you'll see after the show. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to your comments. And if you'd like to learn more about trading, etc., we'd be happy to teach you. Please drop us a note on Teslafaninsight on Facebook with your email address initially and a phone, and we could coordinate that. You can also join us on Patreon as another option. Hope you have a great day. Best of luck this week. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight, and thanks once again for joining us. What firm are you with, Mark?
It's Renew Physiotherapy.
Great. So, Mark, every day we do a different exercise, and just wondered what you recommend that people do every day relative to the back.
If you could only do one exercise, what I would do would be to put your hands on your back like this. Do a back bend. Nice and easy, 10 times.
Okay.
And that will counteract all of the bending forward that we do throughout the day, whether it's sitting at the computer, sitting in the car, bending forward to get things and pick it up. Even when we sleep at night, people tend to curl up and bend forward. Doing just this nice, easy stretch 10 times, 4 to 5 times a day will get your back healthy.
And your Renew Physiotherapy.
Renew Physiotherapy.
You also recommend the Cobra, where you're laying on your
stretch would be great, where you're laying on the ground and you push on up like this. And that'll help stretch out your spine.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mark.